Topic one, Call of Duty Vanguard. So, Adam, this comes from Ali Jones at Games Radar. The next Call of Duty is reportedly set in an alternate history 1950s where World War II never happened. They write, following its reveal of its claim of what is claimed to be working title for this year's game, Vanguard, leaker Modern Warzone has released a new report outlining the game's setting. In a recent video, Modern Warzone stated that, quote, the entire game takes place in an alternate timeline where 1945 wasn't the end of World War II and will take place in the 1950s. Adam, first of all, let's start. Where are you in a Call of Duty sort of fan base?
I haven't played one since I want to say World War II.
Like the original World War II?
No, like the newest one that was Call of Duty World War II.
Okay.
I played basically like your Modern Warfare all the way up to 3 without any hesitation, Black Ops all the way to 2 without any hesitation. I was pretty big into it on the 360 era. And then, like a lot of things, you play the same thing 10 times in a row. Eventually, you start to get bored of it. So I've been kind of off it for a while. Also, I felt like they were starting to get too much into the, what's the best way I can explain it? Like, you have to chug a shit ton of monster to really, like, keep up with those games because it's just way too fast-paced. I found that, like, when I started getting out, the spawn rating in those games was getting so ridiculous that, because I know why. They wanted you to always be in the action, whereas my brain goes, I'm more of a tactical player, so I'd rather have at least a few seconds to get my whereabouts and kind of assess everything before I jump into the action. But then again, it's hard to jump into the action when 5 seconds from the second you get going again, there could be somebody behind you without you having any idea. So I kind of noped out of that after a while, but story modes I always kind of kept up with when I could. Even when the multiplayer wasn't great, I'd still play the story campaigns because I thought they're, like, here's the thing. A lot of people love to shit on Call of Duty for being copy and paste, but you better not change the core gameplay because that is probably some of the smoothest, best first-person shooter gameplay you're going to get. So when they mix it with a maybe lackluster but kind of average story, it's still a pretty good campaign because the shooting is that interesting and that much fun to play. So I'm not like out of Call of Duty, which what makes this story so interesting, but I'm also like in the, okay, even if this was like a really cool concept, I'm going to need like half off before I start looking at it, which for Call of Duty games is pretty rare.
Yeah, so you skirt both the line between multiplayer and single player then, right?
In my heydays, I was playing a lot of multiplayer still, and then I'm pretty much almost anti-competitive gaming right now because it's not fun. It's not what I think I'm too old for this shit. I can't believe I'm 33 using that line already, but I think I'm too old for it.
We're old now. We don't play that online game.
I'm not interested in being angry. I'm already angry enough at real life. I don't need video games to also just keep perpetuating that hate.
Grandpa needs his quiet time and his stories. He doesn't need kids yelling at him. I have one at home that does that for me. I don't need to pay an online subscription.
You're forgetting the anime butts. That's the other part that I have to intake too. You know, I got to have a little bit of dessert on top. You know.
Yeah, I'm the same way. In a way, I really enjoy Call of Duty multiplayer, or the opposite. I like the single player campaigns. I've never super been into the online multiplayer. I was just never really good at it, but I've always really enjoyed the campaigns, especially like historical ones. You probably don't know this about me, but I actually went to school for history, particularly like military history. So for me, it was always, if there was a historical tone to it, I was right into it. So whether it was Battlefield 1, Call of Duty, even the old Medal of Honor games, like those were my jam.
Yeah, you had like that Brothers in Arms.
Like, Brothers in Arms. Yeah, that one is probably the best one.
What was the Valve one? I think it was Day of Defeat.
Yeah, I never played that one, but I played like some like really bad ones because like at one point everything was a World War II military shooter. And
it's almost like the games industry just slaps the spam button on anything that works for like 5 years.
Who would have thought?
I know.
So that actually brings me back to a question I have later. But what do you think of this campaign of going to World War II / alternate history World War II?
Well, assuming it's true, I'm so down for that because it'd be certainly more refreshing than the same pretty cookie cutter military, either historical or fake present fiction kind of stories that we get now. Because, you know, sure, you could just have another story where it's, hey, look at how we won the war. Or you could have another story of like, hey, look how we beat the terrorists. This time it's like, hey, what if we weren't winning properly? Like, I don't know if they mean like the Nazis win in this, or if it's just the war still going.
Yeah, the
I don't.
impression
Is that
I got,
clarified in the article? Because I can't
the
remember.
impression I got, it says the entire game takes place in an alternate timeline where 1945 wasn't the end of World War II.
So it sounds
So
maybe
it's
more
still
like it's
going
still
on.
ongoing.
Yeah. So I think this is an awesome idea. I think
Either
a
option
co-
is amazing because you can either do what some games have tried to do and not do it very effectively, which is where you get like your turning point. Was it turning point something of liberty? Like it was
yeah,
like a system starter for like 360, I think,
yeah, I
and
remember
it
that one.
wasn't very good. You could get like you're not going to get into Wolfenstein territory, I don't think, because it's the
Sure, you could.
50s.
Why not?
Well, you could, but I think for Call of Duty, it'd be wiser to kind of just stick to what they're. Well, that's not true. They do Black Ops and they have the crazy mech shit, so who knows? But if I really had the choice, I want them to do like 50s, like years after like we lost, because that's where you get into things like I don't know if you've ever heard of the show Man in the High Castle that's on
Oh yeah.
Prime, like that
Oh
kind
yeah.
of stuff where I'm going, dude, that's cool because you're taking it's still the same like gritty, serious like shooter that you could have, but now you have the layer of okay, but now you're fighting up rather than most Call of Duty games where you're already the hero and you're just overcoming the villain. This time you've lost, now you have to be the one that get up there. Because more often than not, you're just defending, freedom, whereas you've lost it, now you have to reclaim it. Some games have tried to do it, and most do it ineffectively. I mean, Homefront comes to mind with that. So it's just
Yeah, I,
it's a great concept. It's one of those things that like I feel that few companies can do, but with something with the pedigree of Call of Duty, I think they'd have like the best chance of anyone to do so.
yeah, I think because I've been thinking about this, like putting my history degree to use. Um, I was thinking like, what would this game look like? And I think you could go down the route like Wolfenstein and do, what if we lost, blah 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 blah. And I think that would be great. But I feel like that's already been done a little bit too. Like it's a little played out of like, what if the Nazis won? What I would like to see is I'd like to just see a world that's been ravaged by, you know, 10, 15 years of war and kind of see what a 1950s style war would look like. So maybe have smaller nuclear weapons. So like having like not necessarily like super campy, but almost like fat like a Fat Man from Fallout 3 where you got like little mini nuke launchers that you can like shoot or do that kind of crazy stuff. Like think almost like a I mean, it's going to go kind of outside the realm, but like almost like a Command and Conquer Red Alert sort of system where you've got like next technology. So you can have like rockets, like they were working on rocket technology just towards the end of the war and like massive mechanized machines and stuff. Like I think it's really cool. And so I was thinking like, how would you do this story? Because for as crazy and silly as Call of Duty can get, I've always found that when it comes to their historical and I'm not counting Black Ops because Black Ops was like a little bonkers. But in terms of like their World War II stuff, they were always pretty accurate, or at least like tried to be respectful of that time period. And so I don't think we're gonna have a super crazy thing where it's like zombies and the occult and Mecha Hitler and all that kind of stuff.
As
But
much as we love it, but probably not.
I think for this one, I think you go down the serious route. You make it like a serious, gritty sort of situation. And so I was like, okay, well, how would this look? And so I'm thinking
That would
like,
have been my question: is what do you do with a story, or what do you even do with a setting where it's just the same as World War II, but maybe a few years removed? Because
so
my question with them would at that point would be like, what's the point of it just being like World War II in 1950? Like, is it really going to look that much different?
I think it would, and I think it would be sort of because if you think about it, like after the 1950s, it becomes very much more like more U.S. military might versus like you get Cold War battles. So you got stuff like the Korean War and Vietnam, where it's a massive military power against a rebel-backed
Well, I'm just
whatever. It's
thinking
not.
like, how many more times are you just going to have like fights in no man's land and the beaches of Normandy kind of stuff? Like, would you have to suddenly change the setting to be something different? It's like, hey, like the war has actually moved on to Africa or somehow Australia. Like, would you have to like go elsewhere to kind of make it just seem like it's a little bit different? Because if it's just it's the war in Germany or in France or in Russia, but it's 1952 now. Like it doesn't feel like atmospherically, it wouldn't seem like it's any different from any World War II game that we've experienced. So it would have to be something more akin to like the weaponry and like hearing different points of view of like how the like it would really be the story selling it, which means the multiplayer is kind of inconsequential almost, aside from like a few different weapons.
Well, I think you get stuff like I know like this was like just at the peak of like rockets. Like they were just starting working on on rocket technology, and nuclear weapons were just becoming a thing. So I mean, how I would envision like what would it take for the war to continue? And so if you like the turning points that I think would happen is like this is how I'd make the story is, you know, go back to 1941. Japan attacks Pearl Harbor. It does far more damage than it initially did in World War, like in the actual World War II. So like a lot more damage. The Japanese end up winning the Battle of Midway. They get control of the Pacific Islands, so the U.S. really can't get out and wage war on Japan in the Pacific, and so they now have more time and energy to focus on Russia and China and, you know, the Asians, like the eastern or western side of Asia. That then puts Russia that they now have to worry about Japan um, and Germany, and so they end up, you know, conceding to Germany, or they at least like get past the Urals, and then Germany takes over eastern Russia. They're now able not able to push into Germany, so now you've got the U.S. and the U.K. and the Allies, you know, fighting on the western front of Europe. Now here's where it gets interesting: is if that's the case and Germany doesn't have to fight a two-sided war, are they now more focused that, you know, D-Day never succeeds? Do we have a situation where D-Day doesn't happen and the Allies never get a foothold um, of Western Europe? And so now you have a thing where maybe you're playing as the Allies on a defense against a German invasion of the UK, right? So you're playing in the UK and it's getting invaded, or the UK, you know, gets knocked out. They, you know, secede to Germany. They take over because I think by the 19 when did just a second. Let me do some history checking stuff. Long story short, um, seconds. I want to see when Winston Churchill got voted out of
Well,
Parliament.
like I said, it's just it becomes a case though of like, okay, you can do a lot with the campaign, but what's the multiplayer then? Because I mean, I'm sure nobody would really care if the multiplayer was just the same as like what you would expect from say World War II Call of Duty, but just maybe with a few different weapons. Because I mean, it's the multiplayer; they don't particularly care. But is there a selling point to it aside from it just being the same old multiplayer? Now, I know that that doesn't mean shit to a lot of people, so it probably wouldn't make a difference. The story's kind of the carrying weight of that concept. It just becomes a game of like, okay, but if you're going to advertise this game like it's a different like alternate reality of World War II, is that going to matter to the people that aren't going to care about the campaign? And to be completely honest, as much as I love the campaign, most people that play Call of Duty don't play it.
So I guess in terms of like a gameplay style, what it would be is it would be sort of, um, like I said, kind of a little bit more vertical. So like you get more into like it almost would look more like a battlefield in that sense, because like World War II is a lot of mechanized fighting or like small fighting. So I'd say you have small nuclear like arms. I would say you see like the introduction of helicopters, rockets. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I see. Like the that's kind of where I'm at. Like the Germany was really heavy into the armored sort of stuff like that, and just kind of weird batshit stuff, crazy like that. And so that's where I'm kind of seeing is like you go into like almost 1950s, almost like a Fallout style weapon system, but not stupid
I
or
mean,
not
I
not
know I'm
stupid, but not
overthinking it
silly.
anyway because, like I said, most Call of Duty players they're buying the Call of Duty no matter what's on the label. Activision would have to pick a really, really, really weird concept to get Call of Duty fans to shy away from it.
Yeah.
So, so I'm probably going a little bit too far. The only exception to the rule so far has ever seemed to be like futuristic combat. When like Infinite Warfare seemed to rub a lot of people the wrong way, which is still one of those things that drives me crazy because my brain was like, oh man, we've had Call of Duty doing the same stuff so long. Now they're gonna do weapons that we've never seen before in Call of Duty. That's something I'm interested in. And people were like, meh. I'm like, well, then I realized, oh yeah, people don't like change. So
Yeah, like I don't know. I think you're gonna see a lot of the same stuff. Like there'll still be a lot of the weapons, but just like next level ones. But I think what will really stand out is like the nuclear aspect.
now, yeah, I don't
So
know. I
having
don't know how much you can do that in multiplayer because I mean everybody knows the nuke as being the be all end all of a game. So
oh well, because that's we're thinking of like a traditional one. But if you had like these little mini, I don't know. I'm kind of speculating here, but that's where I'm kind of seeing it. But going back to where I see the campaign, I can also see, you know, you have a situation where maybe Germany's now invading the U.S., continental U.S., and it's like, okay, now we're fighting, pushing it back from there.
That'd
That's kind
probably
of
be your
an
safest
option.
bet, as being like Germany, like the US actually being a battlefront rather than it being in Europe. That'd probably be your
Yeah,
solution.
yeah. So we'll see where it goes. Yeah. Do you think this is? I mean, it's Call of Duty, but how do you think this
It's
is
a
gonna
new,
receive
if it's a
competitive?
new concept, I'm down for anything, because I mean, if it's not the same Modern Warfare, Black Ops, or World War II thing, anything that isn't the same three, I'm pretty happy with. The only exception to the rule has always been World War One, because I think the further and further back you go, it becomes harder to sell like actually like fast gameplay because the weapons are just not there. So like,
Yeah,
I think it'd be really interesting if they would take like a stab at like say the Vietnam War. Like that's something I would be interested in, but I know that that's a bit of a sore spot for Americana, so they try to shy away from that.
yeah. They're
They
not
they
big on the
typically
ones.
don't like losing.
No, but I mean, this is once again looking at a very American-centric thing. I mean, there's tons of historical conflicts throughout the globe that would be really fascinating to cover. So,
But you know,
is there like
it's always being sold to an American audience first and foremost, so you kind of got to make sure they're involved.
true? Yeah. Um, in terms of like World War II games, like there's been a ton. What are some of the standouts for you? Like, what are some of your favorite ones that
Well, aside from Call of
or
Duty, that's where it gets tough, because I mean, you can get to something like say, well, I think that was World War One, but there was a Ubisoft game called Valiant Hearts that was really good at telling the story of the war that way. But I mean, I'm thinking of like shooters and stuff, and like aside from the stuff that we mentioned earlier, like Your Brothers in Arms and Day of Defeats, there really isn't a lot that I can remember off the top of my head.
yeah.
Because I mean, there's
For
other
me, the
games that
stand
are like I tried to play. There's a game called Valkyria Chronicles, which is kind of, sort of like a JRPG that takes place during that time, and I couldn't get into that game. But so like for the most part, we're probably just looking into like the first person shooter land for that.
I mean, there's some other ones that stand out. Like Sniper Elite was a really fun one. If you ever played that one, kind of like a slow, methodical stealth game. It's a little bonkers a little bit, but
I
it's
mean, you
pretty
can shoot
cool.
people's balls off, so it's something.
That is true. I think though, I think for me, it's Brothers in Arms is probably one of the better World War II games, just because it has that sort of squad-based tactics. It was such a fun game, and I kind of wish that one would come back.